Alright, positive time. What's the coolest thing you've done for a total stranger? I used to go to a drive-through coffee shop on my way to work every morning. While I was waiting to order, I saw a dude in the car behind me with his kid, and they looked like they were talking, and the dad sadly shook his head and the kid sadly drooped his head. He was probably like 9 or 10. I'm thinking the dad doesn't have enough to get his kid a little hot chocolate or something. So I order and get to the window and tell them I want to pay for the guy's stuff behind me and add a hot chocolate to their order. Come to find out, all that's on the order is a small hot chocolate. So the dude was just there to get his kid something, knowing he couldn't get anything, and the kid was sad about it. This is all assumption, by the way. So anyways, I tell them to add a large black coffee and upsize the hot chocolate. So they do, and I just drive off. The next day when I got my coffee, the guy who works there reaches out the window like he wants to shake my hand, and I look at him weirdly, and he tells me how the guy teared up when they gave him the coffee and hot chocolate and that it was paid for. So he just gave them the money he had and said to pay for the person behind him if it would cover it. The coffee shop guy said it went on for 22 cars before the poor girl didn't have enough cash to pay for the 4 large drinks the person behind her had ordered. He said it was the coolest display of humanity he'd seen in a while and wanted to shake my hand, so I did, and he gave me my coffee free that day. The coffee shop guy said it went on for 22 cars. He said it was the coolest display of humanity he'd seen in a while. Things like this make me feel so happy every time I hear them. I was waiting in line to pay at the vet, and the guy in front of me was $25 short. He said he would be able to pay on Friday. I think it was Tuesday. The receptionist said it was their policy that they were not supposed to let the pet go without full payment. This meant he would have to be charged extra for them keeping the pet overnight, and the pet would have to be away from home for 3 more days. He went into one of the exam rooms to talk to the vet about his cat. I told the receptionist to put the rest of his bill on mine. 2 days later I got 2 cards. One from the vet thanking me for being kind to fellow customers, and the other from the guy who was short on cash. I felt amazing for the rest of the week. Best $25 I've ever spent. I had a friend whose dog got bloat, and the condition was so bad that the vet said there was no saving her. Turns out he didn't have enough money to put her down either. He called everyone he could, but no one was able to come through. Finally another pet owner walked up and gave him the money. I was nearly in tears when he told me the story. What you did probably meant a lot to that person. Variety of little things pop into my head. 1. I always carry jumper cables. No so much for me, but other people I find in parking lots. 2. Guy at a gas station with kids asked for a couple of bucks so he could afford gas to get home. I just filled up his tank. 3. Bought coats for our daycare. Turns out the kids weren't going outside because some parents couldn't afford coats. So now they have a I forgot tub. We let the staff know that if a kid needs to go home with a coat, we would replace them. 4. Carried groceries for the elderly lady who lived upstairs above me. She would always bake me nice things. 5. Stop and give directions. My work always has lost people, so I end up walking them to their destination. The thing I remember is that it doesn't take much time or effort, but can make a lot of difference to the person just to know someone cares. Found a kid crying in a locked bathroom, lights turned off. Turned out he was being bullied, so I bought him a candy bar. Awesome. Bullying sucks. I live in Australia, and it was the middle of summer, about 43°C, 109°F, in the shade. When I was leaving the shops, I noticed an 80-year-old man running for the bus, but it didn't see him. He was swearing and very angry, so I stopped and asked where he was heading. He was going in the opposite direction than me, but I gave him a lift home and even a cold beer as I had just bought a 6-pack. TLDR. Saved 80-year-old man waiting 45 minutes in 43°C, 109°F, heat by giving him a lift home and a beer. Dude, it's Australia. You probably saved his life, either from the heat or from the poisonous everything. Just a thought. Not sure if this is the coolest thing I've done, but it was definitely one of my coolest stranger encounters. I posted the story in another thread a little while back, so I'm sorry if you've already read it, and hello again. I was flying Southwest back from a family trip. If you haven't flown SW before, there are no assigned seats. Basically you line up by a number on your ticket prior to boarding and pick whatever seat you want once on board. When I got on the plane, I saw a man waving to me out of the corner of my eye. He was a larger gentleman who was sitting in the aisle seat of his row with a man sitting in the window seat. The middle was empty. When the line moved up and I had reached his row, he asked if I would please sit in the middle seat. I was confused by this, but he quickly explained that he only flies SW and once on board, he looks for the smallest person possible to sit next to him in the hopes that it won't be uncomfortable for anyone. I'm not exactly small, but I'm a girl and somewhat petite. I figured what the heck and sat down. We sat comfortably the whole flight with him placing his hands on his stomach so as not to intrude on my space. Even though I told him I was fine, we talked and joked the whole time and it was one of the best flights I've ever had. TLDR. Sat next to a large gentleman on a flight who took steps to make everyone comfortable. Had one of the best flights of my life. Was at a bar with some of my girls. There was this guy there who seemed so out of place. He was with friends, but he was giving off the most socially awkward "what am I doing here" vibe. After seeing him get ragged by his friends after being shot down by 3 separate females, I went over to him in front of his friends, pulled him gently by the tie and said, "Let me buy you a drink." I ended up speaking to him for about 30 more minutes while his friends cackled amongst themselves like hens. Thunderous applause. The girl every guy needs, but not the girl every guy deserves. I made a bouquet of about 15 roses for my then girlfriend for Valentine's Day. I grow roses. I was sitting on the bus across from this girl that was about 3 years younger than me. I sat down, put the vase of roses on the seat next to me and prepared to send me girlfriend a text message. Then I heard her bawling her eyes out. The girl across from me had seen the flowers and, I'm guessing, had broken up with her boyfriend a few days prior and just started crying. When my stop came, I gathered 4 roses from my bouquet and said, "Look, these were for my girlfriend, but you look like you could use a few. Happy Valentine's Day," and handed her 4 roses. The anonymous girl grinned from ear to ear and let out a sheepish "thank you." I smiled back, turned around and got off the bus. That's awesome. Thanks from all the broken hearts out there. When I was in college, I came down my stairs and saw a dog with no leash or owner in sight. I sat down in the stairs and put my hand out. The dog came right over and was very nice. So I thought the owner may live near, and his dog got out. So I went upstairs and got a makeshift leash, and got the dog some lunch meat and a bowl of water, and noticed he had a mud-covered tag. It was Friday at 4:55 and the city office was closing. Since I knew it belonged, I took the dog in for the weekend, till I could call Monday. I bought some food, a leash and a toy for the dog. I called Monday and found the owner, and he was missing his dog for 3 weeks. He cried. I cried. He tried to give me $100 and said that's all he could afford, but I gave it back. The dog was very sweet, well behaved, never barked. I saw a child crying and not consciously trying to be nice. I handed him a little wooden turtle I had just bought. I wasn't even thinking when I did this and he immediately stopped crying and looked up to me. I smiled and patted his head. It felt strange but very warm. Children's skulls aren't as thick as grown adults. What you were feeling was his brain. I work in an RSA. It's a club where war veterans and old folk come to hang out, line dance and drink cheap beer. Every Sunday we had a regular come in just before closing. Usually he'd buy something cheap for himself. On the odd occasion he'd buy something more expensive. Me and some other staff members often discussed him, and we presumed that he gambled on the machines before getting a bite to eat. I was working on Mother's Day, which happened to be a Sunday, and after a busy lunchtime we were all ready to close. Only half an hour or so to go. Then in comes the usual man, except this time he's with his wife and 2 kids. They weren't dressed the smartest, slightly dirty, and they all looked at the menu with that sort of "crap this is expensive" look on their faces. We watched them half argue over what they were going to eat before they moved up to the counter and ordered. One kid's crumbed fish. That was all, on Mother's Day, for 4 of them. To make things worse, the man paid in small change and I couldn't help but feel sorry for the man as they took a seat at a nearby table. I walked into the kitchen as the chef was preparing their order and saw some extra roast beef and some chicken extras that were half cooked. I dropped them into the deep fryer and told the chef I'd get rid of them for him. I plated up the 2 pieces of chicken and the roast, along with their kids' fish and took it down to their table. I didn't want to embarrass them in any way, so I just sorta said, here's some extras and we're about to close, so I don't know if you guys want them or not. The mother said thank you, and the dad looked at me with the most grateful look on his face. More people should learn from this. This thread seems like Humanity 101. I held an old lady's hand as she went down the metro escalator. She just approached me, explained how she had slipped and fallen recently and could use a hand. I guess it helped that she reminded me of my grandmother. Very nice. That's totally not tickage. I was traveling home and stopped in a gas station. When I went to pay, there was a very young couple in front of me talking, and I couldn't help but overhear them discussing the fact that they had $20 between them, which they were not sure would get them home, and they didn't have enough money to buy anything else. I thought to myself that they had a long trip in front of them. Gas was less than a $1 a gallon at the time. When they got to the clerk, I reached over and handed the clerk my credit card and told him to fill their car with gas. The couple turned and looked at me, and then she started to cry. I told them to go get some sandwiches and drinks and that I would pay for them also. They thanked me a lot, too much, and I just said that if they ever got the chance and were able to do the same for someone else, just like someone had done for me 15 years earlier and really saved my bacon and allowed me to get home at Christmas time, I hope they have done that. That's a very sturdy thing to do. They probably did. Realistically, when most people get charity like that, they remember it. Never anything dramatic or life-saving, except that I give blood. I was walking home once and stopped off in a park. Blueballs were out, and I went round gathering up all the ones that had been snapped off. I don't pick ones that are still growing to bring home for the kitchen. On the road, there was a woman, red-eyed, head down, looking totally forlorn. She made eye contact with me and I held out the bunch of bluebells to her. She took them and I smiled and walked away. I glanced back and she was watching me with a huge grin on her face. TLDR. I gave a crying woman a bunch of flowers I'd meant for my house. You probably made her day. Nice job. I was at a bar with a friend one night when I noticed one of the particularly drunk girls leaving. One of the shady guys who'd been sitting by himself the whole night watching the women got up and followed her out. I told my friend what I noticed, so we walked outside to make sure nothing was up. The guy asked her if she needed a ride home. So before she could reply, we walked over to them and my friend asked if either one of them had a cigarette he could bum. The girl handed him a cigarette and so we stayed there a bit to chat with her. The creepy dude glared at us a bit, but finally gave up and went back inside. We called her a cab. Glad to know we very likely prevented something. A couple years ago I had a Mustang, and one of the things that I did was replace my factory headlights with new ones off eBay. I was a student at the time and had noticed another Mustang, same color and all, frequently parked in the deck near me. One day I saw that someone had broken out his headlight, so I went home, grabbed my original one, bagged it up and left it at his car door. The next day she put it on. Feels good, man. True that. High five-o. This is not me, but I have to give props to my cousin. He's the most caring person in the world with the worst anger issues. Funny, I know. He will stop whatever he is doing to work on anyone's computer. Having computer trouble and need a fix now? My cousin will always be available. Bum on the side of the road begging for change at every freaking corner? You bet your butt each one will get at least $1 from him. Having a bad day and he hears word of it? You're going bowling. Nico, it's your cousin. Let's go bowling. Performed CPR on an elder man in the commissary. I revived him and had him in the recovery position before EMTs arrived. When I worked at Kohl's, I gave discounts if I freaking felt like it. One super date night, a little girl and her mom walk up to the register. The little girl is buying one of those Onisies and has $20 bucks in her hand. The Onishi is a little over $20, so I gave her some bulls discount that brought it down to $18. The mom was very grateful and the little girl's smile as she walked out holding her bag was priceless. Frick you, Kohl's. It was about 1 AM. I was walking back home with my girlfriend when I saw a dead cat on my road. I went to move it to the side when I realized it was still moving alive. I spent a few minutes trying to find the RSPCA number and then realized it had a tag on its collar with a number. I rang the number once. No one picked up. Tried again. A lady picks up, sleepily. Hello. Yes. Do you have a grey cat? I'm sorry to tell you, but it got hit by a car. I told her where I was. OMG, I'll be right there. She was visibly shaken, so I offered to come with her to the vets, holding the cat on my lap. I didn't want her to have to drive alone, fuss over the cat, and get into an accident. Stayed for about 45 minutes. Eventually she left the cat there to be looked after overnight and drove us back. He died later. I'm just happy she didn't find him dead. TLDR. Cat blood all over my trousers and hands. A young girl who was homeless was outside a McDonald's. I didn't have any change but my debt card, so I asked her if she wanted something to eat and she happily asked for a chicken burger. I saw a guy changing his tire on the side of the road just as dusk was falling. Figuring he could use a little extra light, I pulled in behind him and left my headlights on. When I got out of the car and started talking to the man, he was old and a little frail, so I changed his tire for him. It wasn't as nice as the time I ran into a burning apartment building, but I knew those people. You need more than one upvote, and I physically can't give it to you. It was pouring down rain one afternoon and I was in Arby's drive-thru. The speaker box was broken for taking orders, so they had one employee to stand by it and relay your order to the kitchen via walkie-talkie. Worst job ever to have. The poor guy didn't even have an umbrella, so when I drove up I gave him mine. And unsuspectingly when I went to the window to pay for my food, they didn't charge me. Good karma begets good karma. You would think they would just have everyone order at the window. 2 summers ago, I studied abroad in Florence, Italy. Since it was a college program, I had a bunch of friends there as well. The night before we left, we all had to clean out our apartments. While cleaning out our refrigerators and pantries, we realized we had purchased more food than we could possibly eat. Typical Americans. Not wanting to waste all this good food, we all bagged up our leftovers and took them to the homeless crowd that often gathered outside the Santo Spirito church. It felt great to give them probably a week's worth of food. A few tears were shed as they kept saying Gracie Mill, thanks 1,000. Very cool, and yes, it's typical of us. I was in DC buying a metro ticket to get back to my friend's house and saw a mother and 2 children trying to figure out the kiosk. They seemed confused with the calculating the stops and American money and I asked if she needed help. Turns out they were Australian and I helped them get their metro passes and the right change. Small and took like 2 minutes, but saved her a headache and missing a train. It's not the coolest story, but I felt pretty good. It's not the coolest story. No. See, that's just it. It's maybe not big to you, but if she were to tell the story, it's pretty awesome. Every winter, our family gives out blankets to homeless people or people living in slums. It gets pretty cold in Delhi and every year some people die of the cold. Feels nice to help people. The price of a blanket is less than what a family meal in a restaurant would cost. More Indians from the middle upper class should do this. The rich-poor disparity in India is jarringly painful at times. I give blood every 3 months, as often as you're allowed here. In exchange for a small amount of my time and minimal discomfort I can save several lives. How freaking brilliant is that? Next time I go I'm signing up to be a bone marrow donor. I'm a bit more scared about that but I think of it this way. If I was walking across the road and saw someone about to be hit by a car and knew, for a fact, that I could save them and only receive minor discomfort in return, I wouldn't hesitate to do it. Exactly. I don't give blood all that often because I often get very ill afterwards, but I'm on a bone marrow registry, and I'm an organ donor on my license. One day driving home I was waiting at the intersection for the light that goes straight into the apartment complex. It's rush hour and I'm watching the passing traffic and I notice a car moving super slow with the indicator on for the next turn. People are honking and then I notice there's a guy pushing his pickup truck that had broken down from the driver's side window. Immediately I put my car into park and fly out to go help him. I'm a slender girl and at the time I was 16 and wearing flats and a floral skirt and I had literally jumped out of a big black SUV. I ran over and started to push from the passenger side window. Suddenly, the people from the cars behind mine jumped out and some big guys from the nearby Taco Bell ran out to come and help too. And all the time I couldn't help but wonder if anyone else would have done anything if I hadn't. It still makes me so happy thinking about that good deed. Whenever I'm traveling and see a soldier in the airport who is eating at the same restaurant as me, I ask the waiter to put their food on my bill. I always ask the waiter to not tell them who paid for their meal, just to say thank you. I've watched dozens of grown men get teary-eyed when an anonymous stranger pays for their meal. My small way of saying thanks. I get 20 VIP tickets to college baseball games through work, with free food and awesome seats right on the third baseline. Whenever I end up with extra tickets I wait outside the front gate for a family looking for tickets. I give them as many free tickets as I can. Logged in just to comment, even though late. I work for a gaming company, and we get some free game time every year as bonuses. I saw a kid at a restaurant whose family was pretty large wearing one of our t-shirts. I asked him if he played and he mentioned he did, but couldn't afford the cost anymore for the monthly sub. I laid out the annual pass requirements, so he could get an extra game for free, then gave him 2 free years for him and his brother. He didn't think I was serious at first, but dang it felt good to give something I thought trivial to someone else for their enjoyment. When I didn't have kids, and had plenty of time, and a drive of an hour home from work on a main highway, I used to stop about once a month to help people with car troubles. You wouldn't believe how much quicker a tire change goes with 2 people, or in the instances where it was an older couple, I had them wait in the car while I did it. People are too afraid of getting murdered to stop anymore. But if I see a single mom on the side of a dangerous highway, whatever I am doing can wait. Good job, Blizzard employee. I love going into mom and pop shops. It's not a hipster thing either. I enjoy seeing their faces light up when a customer walks in the door. Most of them are going by the wayside now, and I enjoy helping them any way I can. They are almost always pleasant to talk to and seem overjoyed when you purchase something from them. I know I am helping them and their family make ends meet. I was at the bargain store picking up some snacks while I was doing laundry at the laundromat next door. As I'm in line, I notice a kid in front of me about 11 years old with a few items. An airsoft gun, airsoft BBs, a cap gun and some caps. He asks the lady how much each is, and if he couldn't afford the airsoft gun, he would take the cap gun. When she told him he was about $3 short for the airsoft gun and ammo, he started tearing up and took the cap gun. I saw him walk outside and hand the stuff to his little brother and he said, "Sorry, Nick, we just didn't have enough." The little brother started crying. He was probably 8. Nick sobbed, "But we've been saving for 2 weeks. James is going to make fun of us again." Frick, that crap. I purchased 2 guns and 3 sets of ammo each. 300 pellets total. Walked out and looked at the kid. "Hey man, you left your stuff inside." Handed him the bag. Upon looking inside, both kids started crying harder and had the biggest look of disbelief on their faces. They hugged the crap out of me and asked why I would do that for them. I got a little tear in my eye and told them that they reminded me of myself and my younger brother at their ages and that they should shoot James once for me. They said they would and that James was a dong. He had apparently been taunting them and pelting them with his airsoft gun for a few weeks. TL. DR. Frick bullies. TL. DR. I'm awesome. And frick bullies. FTFY. I heard a loud noise down the street at around 3 in the morning. I put on some pants and go outside and see that a car has crashed into a street light. I ran to the car and immediately started helping this injured guy. Wrapped my sweater around his bleeding head and told him to hold it tight. They were all drunk, except for the wife of the driver. She couldn't drink because she was pregnant. The driver was yelling at his wife and telling her to tell the cops she was driving. When the cops came, I kind of just wandered home. Before I left though, I told the cops that the pregnant chick was lying because 1. Frick that guy for driving drunk with his pregnant wife and friends, and 2. No one said thank you. TL. DR. Don't drink and drive. Always say thank you. What I would like to know is why wasn't his wife driving in the first place? When I was in New York City for the day to get my visa so I could move to Spain the following semester, I ended up having time to kill in Manhattan, so I walked to a couple of landmarks. While checking out St. Bart's, I struck up conversation with a sickly homeless Cuban man who didn't speak English. Since it was around noon, I offered to continue the conversation over lunch. There he told me about having to flee Cuba during the 80s because he was gay. Then he told me about finding out a couple of years prior that he was HIV positive. Since then he had also lost his job and home. At this point he started rooting through his bag, showing the multitude of medications he took. He touched on how his family had disowned him as well. So he ended up spending his life begging on the streets in a country where he didn't speak the language well, exiled from his home and told by his family that he wasn't welcome. After he told me his story and ate as much as he could, I bought him some fruit, drinks and other food that wouldn't go bad for a while and took him to buy his AIDS medication. I eventually walked him back to St. Bart since it was on the way to my bus stop, and he started sobbing, saying that most people had ignored him for the past couple of days. We exchanged smiles and then I got back onto my bus and left New York. You kind of chase X machine at him. Very awesome. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.